postseason basketball tournament champion. Should Auburn hang an NIT banner? We discuss next on Scarbo Knows. How many times have you seen the phrase hang the banner tossed around on social media, especially on X? Usually it is not a compliment. Usually it's meant in a sarcastic way as a shot from one rival at another. In this case, Alabama at Auburn, because Auburn did something that Alabama has never done, that Auburn has never done, nor has UAB or Samford or South Alabama or any of the other Division I basketball programs in Alabama, men's programs. None of them had ever won the NIT. Certainly none of them has ever won the NCAA men's basketball championship. But that changed on Sunday night in Indianapolis, where the Auburn Tigers, in fascinating fashion, ran away from Tulsa, fell behind Tulsa, had to come from behind in wild and woolly fashion at the end of regulation against Tulsa to get to overtime, and then finally took control in the extra period. And Auburn, the Tigers, 3 weeks after a very, very disappointing selection Sunday, they won the NIT championship. And now they, without sarcasm, get to hang a banner. And why shouldn't they? Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Skarbinski, a.k.a. Scarbo. This is Scarbo Knows. Appreciate you joining us on the Sidelines Live Network. Or if you're watching later on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Kudos to our executive producer extraordinaire, Brendan Martin. And thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services. We'll hear more from them later in the show. So let's get into it. Auburn is your NIT champion for 2026. And the phrase hang the banner, which has been thrown around a lot over the weekend on social media, now has a less than sarcastic meaning. Of course, Auburn should hang a banner. This isn't even a question, okay? I use that as a title just to kind of grab your attention because people have been throwing that phrase at me anytime, especially in this state. If you are not a Barner or a Bammer, and I claim neither, I get accused of both, I claim neither, you will get hit with that phrase. For example, let me give you the sarcastic version of hang the banner. Alabama played Michigan in the Sweet 16. Alabama led Michigan at halftime in the Sweet 16 by 2 points. Now, of course, Michigan took control in the second half, ended up winning 90-77, ending Alabama's season after a fifth trip to the Sweet 16 in the last 6 years. All in all, a productive season for Alabama, not where they wanted to end it. They wanted to get to the Final Four. They wanted to challenge for a national championship. So as we watched the Final Four on Saturday, and we saw what was supposed to be a game of the century type summit meeting between Michigan and Arizona, it was anything but. It fell completely flat because Michigan was far superior. And during that game, as Michigan was building its lead and extending its lead and proving that there was a great distance between the Wolverines and the Wildcats, at one point during the game, I pointed out the fact that of the 5 teams that Michigan had played to that point in the NCAA tournament, only one, Alabama, had made them sweat in the second half. Only one, Alabama, had led them at halftime. And of course, if I had $1 for every time an Auburn fan tweeted back at me, hang the banner, I'd have a lot of dollars. So it is ironic in a way that Alabama fans have been throwing that phrase in Auburn's face as they have advanced throughout the NIT. They won the first 3 games at home. They got to the semifinals in Indianapolis. They beat Illinois State badly in the semis. They got to the final, and it was a roller coaster ride on Sunday night. But Auburn did earn a banner, and it was an amazing game. And it really was Auburn's entire season captured in a 45-minute span of basketball in Indianapolis. Auburn looked really good early, got ahead by 21 points. Everything was working. They were knocking down shots from everywhere. And then little by little, Tulsa started to flip the script. And it turned into Auburn's February. Lost possession after lost possession, the way they lost game after game in that month. And all of a sudden, what looked like a sure thing, think an NCAA tournament bid as Auburn entered the month of February, think NIT championship victory as Auburn entered the second half, became less and less of a sure thing. As Tulsa cut into the lead, went on this ridiculous run, actually took the lead, and appeared to take control late in the game. And that was Auburn's season leading into Selection Sunday. Everything that could go wrong did. They lost 9 of their last 12. And then ultimately, they were left out of the NCAA tournament. They were one of the first two teams out, to use the verbiage that Joe Lenardi, the bracketologist from ESPN, has popularized. And so that's where the NIT final looked like it was headed in the last minute. In the last seconds, as all Tulsa had to do really was inbound the ball. They were up 3 late. They couldn't inbound. They got a 5-second call. I don't know why they didn't call timeout. Auburn gets the ball, and Kevin Overton, who turned out to be the MVP, knocked down a 3 to tie the game, force overtime, and then he hit a logo 3 in overtime to help propel Auburn to what ended up being a 92-86 victory. I think that was the final score. And so Auburn did flip the script on its season, rewrote the narrative in that game, just as its romp through the NIT rewrote the narrative on its season. And so for anyone who wonders, why would you play in the NIT? It's not what it used to be. The major programs, the high majors in particular, don't play in it. In fact, in this year's NIT, of the 32 teams, 28 were so-called mid-majors. Only 4 power conference teams participated. A number of schools, Indiana, Florida State, opted out. Some of them, like Oklahoma, went and played in the Crown Basketball Championship. Oklahoma lost that title game to West Virginia yesterday. I'm not sure the value there other than money, dollars. They threw NIL money at the winners the more you won. There were only, 8 teams in that tournament? I think that was a number. Not a real national tournament. But the NIT, even though it's not what it used to be, is still a national tournament. And as I said, no team from the state of Alabama on the men's side had ever won one of those until Auburn did it on Sunday night. So they lifted a trophy. They danced in the confetti. They cut down nets. And now they will and should hang a banner in Neville Arena. Now, this was comical to Alabama fans, as you might imagine, because it is the job of Alabama fans to diminish, demean, and degrade anything that Auburn accomplishes, and vice versa. It works both ways. It's not exclusive to one fan base or the other. So I thought it would be a little instructive as we talk about this and what it meant for Auburn's season. Will there be any carryover? Why it was a great decision to play in the NIT, because it did help Stephen Pearl and company rewrite their narrative of Pearl's first season as head coach. I thought it'd be instructive to look back and see how significant accomplishment is this or isn't it? And I was a little surprised. I would have thought that the SEC would have won more NIT championships throughout the history of the tournament. Not so. Only 3 SEC programs before Auburn had won an NIT championship. Kentucky did it twice, way back in 1946, and then 30 years later in 1976. Vanderbilt did it in 1990. South Carolina went back-to-back in 05 and 06. And 20 years after the Gamecocks' last NIT title, Auburn won it all on Sunday night. So only 4 SEC programs have won NIT championships. So it's an accomplishment. If you do something that most of your conference has not done, that's an accomplishment. If you win a championship of any tournament you enter, that's an accomplishment. You should celebrate it. You should feel good about it. You shouldn't apologize to anyone for it. And so Auburn has no reason to apologize to anyone for A, playing in the NIT, and certainly not for B, winning the NIT. And then I thought, okay, that's looking at it from an SEC perspective. What about from the IBOB perspective? What about from the Iron Bowl of basketball rivalry and the history of those two programs side by side in the NIT? How has that history gone? And as with most things college basketball, Alabama has a more storied history than Auburn. It's just a fact. And that holds for the NIT as well. Look at the numbers. Alabama's played in the NIT 16 times. The last time was in 2019, so not that long ago. Auburn just finished its 7th trip to the NIT. So Alabama's been there twice as many times. Alabama's been in the semifinals 6 times, in the finals twice, in 2001 and 2011. Unfortunately for the Crimson Tide, they lost in both championship games. Ironically, the first one in 2001, they lost to Tulsa, the program that Auburn beat last night, to win the NIT. In its only trip through the semifinals, to the finals, to the championship game, Auburn is now 1-0 in championship games. And what really stood out to me, and you're probably looking at that chart and wondering, what do MMLs, what does that stand for? What does that mean? How about mid-major losses? Because one of the criticisms that Alabama fans in particular have thrown at Auburn about this NIT is that, as I said earlier, the field was made up primarily of mid-majors. Only 4 power conference teams participated. So, of course, this is used as a way to downplay Auburn's accomplishment. Big deal, you beat a bunch of mid-majors. Well, you could put it that way. However, I went back and did a little research, and of the 16 times that Alabama has played in the NIT, again, never won it, got to the semis 6 times, got to the finals twice, but half of their trips to the NIT were ended by mid-major programs. 8 of 16, including the last one in 2019, when Alabama, as the number 1 seed, lost at home in Coleman Coliseum to Norfolk State. So if you're an Alabama fan, you really don't have a lot to stand on there to hurl insults at Auburn about, given the fact that, yes, this field was full of mid-majors, but guess what? Auburn didn't lose to any of them. They beat South Alabama. They beat Seattle. Seattle, by the way, was the home of Elgin Baylor. And if you don't know who Elgin Baylor is, Google him. One of the greatest players in basketball history. Played a few years for an NBA franchise called the Lakers. But in college, played for Seattle University. Auburn beat them. Auburn beat Illinois State. And then Auburn ultimately beat Tulsa from the American Conference, again, in the championship game. So, no, not the greatest competition, not the greatest run of opponents, but Auburn has to apologize to no one for its schedule this year. In fact, Auburn overscheduled. We said this before, for that roster in Stephen Pearl's first year as a head coach, completely overscheduled. The schedule was too tough for that roster, and it resulted in too many losses, which ultimately is what kept Auburn out of the NCAA tournament. All right, and so you're saying, okay, big deal. Again, NIT, it's not the NCAA tournament. No one is saying it is. Not even the most diehard Auburn fan would argue that point. But you know what? I decided to look back into NIT history a little deeper to see, what about the true blue bloods? And we like to suggest that Auburn and Alabama have reached that status or are very close to it, given what those programs have done over the last 10 years. Or 6 or 7 years in Alabama's case, a little longer in Auburn's case under Bruce Pearl, Alabama under Nate Oates. And I found something very interesting. Some of the biggest names in college basketball, some of the true blue blood programs in the sport have won NIT championships as well as NCAA championships. And this is just a partial list. I ran out of time to include all of them. There are a lot of programs that have done both. Now, a lot of them, like Holy Cross, did it back in the 40s and 50s. Or CCNY, the City College of New York, did it back in the 40s and 50s. But some of these names you'll recognize. UCLA has won multiple NCAA championships and NITs. Kentucky, North Carolina, Indiana, Louisville, Villanova. How about Michigan and UConn? Why did I circle them? Because we're recording this a few hours before the Wolverines and the Huskies play in the national championship game of the NCAA tournament. They've both won the NIT. In fact, Michigan has won more NIT championships than it has NCAA tournament titles. It's only won one of the big rings in the big dance. That was back in 1989. And yet, for some reason, they did it again Saturday. They did a simulcast on one of these off-brand channels carrying an alternate version of the broadcast of the semifinals. They had the Fab Five on there. Now, look, the Fab Five did a lot of good things for Michigan. They did a lot of good things for college basketball. They never won the title. They lost in the finals to Duke by 20 in 1992. And then they lost the finals in 1993 to North Carolina when Chris Webber called a timeout that they did not have. Much closer game, same result. And yet, you would think that the highlight of Michigan basketball's history is the Fab Five. Not so. This team that's playing tonight, if they win it, could go down as the greatest team in Michigan history. We'll see how that turns out. But that 1989 team with Glenn Rice and Rumeal Robinson, they have been woefully underplayed and underrespected and underappreciated in Michigan history among the college basketball world in general. I can remember I was at that Final Four in 1989 in Seattle in the old Kingdome. Rumeal Robinson won it on 2 free throws, probably the worst foul call ever. Danny Hurley not only would have headbutted a referee, he would have strangled an official had they called that foul against his team to give the other team a chance to win the national championship with 2 free throws, which Rumeal Robinson did. And fun aside, real quick story, Rumeal Robinson was not a great free throw shooter. He was the point guard for Michigan that year. He had missed 2 free throws in a critical game to lose a game during the regular season. And from that point on, he spent a lot of time late at night, early in the morning, whatever free time he had, in the gym by himself shooting free throws. So he was prepared when that moment came in the national championship game. And I'll never forget, after the game, we're in the locker room, and most people have cleared out by this point, and there was a reporter for the New York Times and me. We're the only ones left in there from the media talking to Rumeal Robinson about his journey to hitting the 2 free throws to win a national championship. And he looks around, and there's really no one around, and he shouts out, "Can I get an orange soda?" He gets no response, again, because there's no one around to get him an orange soda. And he stands up, and he writes the lead for me and the dude from the New York Times that says, "If you want something in this life, I guess you have to go get it yourself." And the other reporter and I looked at each other like, bingo, there's the lead. Great, great coda to that national championship. But I've gotten off track a little bit. But Michigan has won 3 NIT titles, actually, in 1984, 1997, and 2004. And, of course, they won the 1989 NCAA championship, which they may add to tonight. We'll see. But the point of this is some pretty big-name programs have thought it was important through the years to play in the NIT. And if you're going to be in it, you might as well win it. And some big boys have. So that's another feather in Auburn's cap. And this all leads to this question, okay, would you rather? All right, that's a fun game you can play in a lot of different ways, take it in a lot of different directions. But the question has been asked, and we'll address it here. Would you rather lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament or win the NIT championship. Now, interestingly, Auburn is well suited to address this subject because if you'll recall, 2 years ago, in the 2024 NCAA tournament, Auburn was a 4 seed, and they played Yale in the first round. Chad Baker-Mazara lost his mind, which was not out of character for him. He got tossed in the first half, and Auburn ended up losing in the first round to Yale. Quite embarrassing. Even though Yale has a quality basketball program and has had for some time, but they're a mid-major. An SEC team is not supposed to lose to a team from the Ivy League in the NCAA tournament, and yet Auburn did. So if you're Auburn, would you rather do that, or would you rather do what you did the last several weeks and overcome the disappointment of being left out of the NCAA tournament, accept the NIT bid, and go on and win the championship? There's no right answer here, folks. There's no yes or no. This isn't math. This is subjective. And I will tell you this, though, and I think it's hard to disagree with this point. Every single coach, every single player at Auburn, in the SEC, across the country, would rather be in the NCAA tournament. That's the goal. When you start practice in October, September now, used to be October 15th as the tip-off date for Midnight Madness and such. But your goal is get to the NCAA tournament. You don't start out the season saying, man, I hope we can make the NIT. It would be great to win the NIT championship. Nobody does that. Certainly not a program that's accomplished what Auburn has accomplished, going to 2 Final Fours since 2019, winning multiple SEC championships in the regular season and in the SEC tournament, being the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament just a year ago, getting to the Final Four just a year ago. Auburn didn't start practice this year, even though they had a completely new roster except for Tahad Pettiford. They didn't start practice saying, man, hope we can get to the NIT. Did you know, hey guys, did you know the NIT this year is in Indianapolis, the same place as the Final Four? Wouldn't that be cool to get there and to win that championship and do something this program and has never done, and very few programs in the SEC have ever done, and a bunch of blue bloods have done? No, of course not. Kevin Overton wasn't thinking that way. Tahad Pettiford wasn't thinking that way. Sebastian Williams-Adams, Elijah Freeman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. None of them was thinking that way. Stephen Pearl certainly wasn't thinking that way. But from where they found themselves on Selection Sunday, completely down in the dirt, completely disrespected, sitting there at 17-16, knowing in their hearts that they just lost too many games. Yeah, you had good metrics. Yeah, you had some quality wins. And as we've pointed out, any of you who are hurling this insult at Auburn, congratulations, you're the 69th best team in the country. What are you even doing? That's comical on its face, because clearly Auburn was better than a lot of teams that got into the NCAA tournament. A lot of the champions of one-bid leagues were not as good as the Tigers. And if you look at Ken Pom, which I did yesterday, maybe the day before, Auburn was number 36 in Ken Pom. So clearly they were better than a bunch of the teams that made it to the NCAA tournament. So winning the NIT does not make them the 69th best team in the country. Let's get real about that, okay? That's nonsense. Not only that, but Auburn, before the NIT, before Selection Sunday, owned and still owns 7 victories this season over teams that made the NCAA tournament. 3 of those teams got to the Sweet 16. Arkansas, Texas, and St. John's. Auburn beat them all. Also lost to Arkansas, but that's not the point. In fact, the teams that Auburn beat, the 7 teams that Auburn beat that made the NCAA tournament field, they went 9-7 as a group in the big dance. So again, Auburn had an argument, but they also realized that nobody had ever gotten in with 16 losses. Nobody had ever gotten in being just one game over 500. And they didn't break that streak. They didn't become the first. And they understood why. So they had a decision to make on Selection Sunday. What do we do? Because you got to make these decisions pretty quick. They were hoping to get into the big dance. They knew there was a chance they might not. So when they were left out, the NIT had to know, are you in or are you out? We want you. Do you want us? And they said yes. Little did they know at the time that Keyshawn Murphy, one of their starters, their only true post player perhaps, certainly their best post player, was going to opt out. And we're still not completely sure why he did that. So it's a little harsh to come down too hard on him without knowing the backstory. So we're not going to pile on. We're not going to do that. In fact, Kevin Overton said the three that he hit at the end of regulation Sunday night to tie the game, send it to overtime, he said that was for three, which is Keyshawn Murphy's number. Now, I don't know if he meant it seriously, like they were there for their teammate, whatever he might be going through that caused him to opt out of the NIT, or whether he said it with a little sarcasm. Who knows? But not knowing, we are not going to pile on Keyshawn Murphy. And remember what Stephen Pearl said when Murphy decided not to play in the NIT. Stephen Pearl said, we appreciate everything he did for the program this year. Makes me think maybe there was something else going on there. Not just him deciding not to play in the lesser postseason tournament. So was it a smart decision by Auburn? Absolutely. Is Auburn in a better place now as a basketball program than it was 3 weeks ago? Of course it is. It played 5 postseason games. It won 5 postseason games. It won a postseason tournament championship. It faced adversity. It had to come from behind in the championship game, had to stage a miraculous comeback in the last 5 seconds just to get to overtime, and then took control in overtime to win the title. And again, they got to dance in the confetti. They got to lift up a trophy. And they got to climb ladders and cut down nets. That is what college basketball is all about. Now, not the tournament they would have preferred to do that in. They would have preferred to be playing tonight in Indianapolis against UConn or Michigan in the national championship game of the NCAA tournament. But if you can't get there, they did the next best thing. And they got better for it. Their players got postseason experience, and their head coach, who had never been a head coach before, got valuable postseason experience. So while you can insult Auburn and you can poke fun at Auburn and you can suggest that they're the 69th best team in America because they won the NIT, look, that's what rivals do. Have at it. Have all the fun you want at Auburn's expense. But Auburn has a trophy, and Auburn is going to have a banner, and Auburn absolutely should hang that banner in Neville Arena. Because you know what? I think the last time I was in Coleman Coliseum, I'm pretty sure I saw a banner that had all the years listed that Alabama played in the NIT. Never won it, but played in it. So, touche. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for me for today. Again, we're getting excited. We're getting ready for the national championship game. We'll have more to say about that later in the week. For executive producer Brendan Martin on the Sidelines Live Network, thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. Don't cost nothing. And thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services, the Rice family. I've known them a long time. They will take great care of you. Let's hear from them next. I'm out. See ya.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.